tax. Rachel briefly mentioned it, but we're going to talk about some of the things that have been happening in the legislature and some things that have not been happening in the legislature. And I'm just going to let Scott roll on and get going about that discussion. By the way, Scott is from Torrington, over on the other side of the state.
About an 8-hour drive.
Good evening, everyone. Wow, you guys are asleep or have your mouths full. Not sure. I'll try it again. Good evening.
Good evening.
And Marty, it's not quite 8 hours. It's 6.5. Going the speed limit. So,
I wouldn't know about that.
So it's a pleasure to be here and just share with you some of the things that are going on. I'm a freshman legislator and unseated somebody that I didn't agree with their values and I didn't feel like they were representing me, and so I invested a lot of time off of work, 1 day a week, going down to the Capitol and just watching what happened, and spent time praying for the legislators. And your eyes are open, and if you want change, be the change you desire, is my biggest takeaway for that. As far as property tax goes, how many people saw relief on their most recent property tax statement? Anyone? Okay. I think the property taxes have been going out of hand. There were numerous bills to try to fix this and come up with a solution, and to no avail. And then it was like in the last hour, they were resurrecting what I call zombie bills, things that we had killed that were bad ideas. They were resurrecting them back to life and bringing them as amendments and renumbering things and putting it into another bill to try to bring it forward, to try to save face, because they're like, oh no, all of our platforms we're going to do something for the people. We're going to help save property taxes. And, oh wait, we haven't done anything. And so, a word of caution is one of the final things that came about is a constitutional amendment that is going to be on your next ballot, and it is going to separate out commercial property with your residential. And so, my opinion on if that gets voted in, one class is going to start paying more than the other, but ultimately, who's still going to pay it? All of us. You know, just like before, with any tax, like the power, it's just going to be passed on to us in different forms. And so, be very, very aware of the. John, is there 2 ballot initiatives? Or
just one,
it's
so far.
Just the one that the legislature, or were there 2 things on the ballot for the legislature?
Just one.
Just one, okay. Something else that is in the works, which is a people's initiative, because the legislature hasn't done much, and this is something, if it interests you all, there is a people's initiative for a 50% reduction on your property tax. By like Brent Bien and Rich Weber and Cheryl, what's her last name? What is it?
Aguiar.
Aguiar, okay.
O-L.
Okay, Aguiar. Okay, and so that is something else to try to be paying attention and looking for, because in order to get it onto the ballot, they needed 100 sponsors, and I believe they got 100 sponsors to the Secretary of State, and Chuck Gray has approved or is in the process of that, verifying those 100 people. But then the next step is getting 30,000 signatures to across the entire state of registered voters. And so if that's something that interests you, I've heard a lot of complaints with other elected officials of, well, where's that money going to come from? Our counties are going to be poor. I I know in my district, 76 cents on the dollar goes immediately to education. So I tend to fight or believe that we are overpaying in taxes, period. And so with the state having over $25 billion surplus in investments, and then that's just the state. Think of all the different agencies and school districts. If you start digging into it, my school district bragged about saving 19.4% of their annual budget because if they had saved 20%, they would have had to send some back to the state. So they frivolously spent things and saved $6.5 million. But if you look at all the different agencies and different government entities across the state, I believe there's a lot of fat that could be cut out of our budget. And my biggest concern is everyone sitting here in the room, because it's not sustainable to continue to increase every tax. I'm on the transportation committee, and YDOT they claimed $400 million of doing their statutory requirements of what they're required to do. And so they need more money, and so the best way to get YDOT more money is increase our diesel fuel tax. Well, hey, we can't just increase diesel, we have to increase the regular fuel so it's fair and equitable for everybody. And so I questioned, hey, what kind of impact is that going to have on the state? Is that going to have, number one, I think it's very detrimental because every item that we consume in this state has been on a truck a dozen or more times to go from a farm to some kind of producer to some kind of distribution center to final retail. Everything, that fuel tax is going to hurt us in the pocket in a long way. So my recommendation is get involved, and you wonder how and what should you do? Well, what interests you? And so my challenge is, I wasn't interested in getting into politics. I thought that was better left to smarter people or than myself, but then the Lord really spoke to me and shared with me the concept of Moses and Aaron. And what he shared with me was with Moses surrendered. God qualified Moses and said, hey, go to Pharaoh and let my people go. And Moses disqualified himself. God saw so much more into Moses than what Moses saw in himself. And so Moses disqualified himself and said, hey, God, I don't think you're a really good judge of character here. I know myself. Can you give me someone else who's a better orator than myself? Can you give me Aaron? And the Aarons are always going to be there to speak up. The Aarons are always going to step up. But if you think about it, Aaron is the one who led the people to the idol worship with the golden calf. And so don't let the call on your life pass you by. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Scott. Boy, there is so much more to tell you all about property taxes. And he didn't mention, because Tony's here, and Tony will want to talk to you about this. He was our point man on putting a cap on your property taxes. That's one of our solutions. A cap on how fast it increases from one year to the next. And we were defeated 3 times. Once in the previous interim and twice during the session on putting a cap on your property taxes. So, the speaker said that he has to study that more. He doesn't know how that would work. So, you don't have to study much about reducing taxes if you're also willing to reduce spending. And that's where you're going to find a big difference between the Freedom Caucus and our colleagues. So, on the spending side, we do believe that government can be reduced, and it shouldn't have to be on your backs. But now I know this subject that we're going to talk about next, and ask Scott to come on up, is very near and dear to your hearts. He's got a map up on there that shows your area of the state, because the Bureau of Land Management has decided to start here with the 30 by 30 program. And there's a lot to be said about this issue for sure. And you can count on the Freedom Caucus to work hard on this.
So just, thanks, John, I appreciate that. And Representative Smith, what a great young man he is. I just want to add, when the legislature fails to do some property tax reform, the people have the right to do it on their own. And I so applaud what's going on right now with people trying to do some property tax reform. But I want you to watch those legislators that come out against that, and there's a few of them that have already started saying, you guys don't understand. Well, maybe we do understand. And it's so great that we can take this into our own hands, and I applaud you for doing that. That is great. When the legislature fails, the people can rise up and do that. So let me start with a quote. A ship in harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are built for. Now I'm going to come back to that. My history here in Marbleton, Sublett County, goes back to the 1980s, when I was hired on by Exxon to help design the LaBarge project. I spent a lot of time here in LaBarge, or in Marbleton. It's while the roads were still dirt here. There was only one paved street, and that was the highway. I remember the Pit and Primer, Marbleton Inn. We used to go to Big Piney to exercise in the high school there, in the weight room. Wonderful, wonderful people, and I have a lot of good friends that live here in Sublett County. I used to represent LaBarge until the redistricting, and I got to meet a lot of good people in LaBarge that I will forever be friends with. But what is Wyoming? Wyoming has been changing slowly, very slowly. 50 years ago, when I was a young kid, we worked hard, as you do now, but government was not in our lives. We only saw government once in a while. We saw the snowplow when it came through to clear the roads, and we always had to watch over our backs for the game warden. Watch out for the game warden. That's about the extent of government back 50 years ago. But now government is in everything that we do. I have a little beehive in the backyard, in my backyard, and I have to have a permit from the state of Wyoming to have that beehive. They are involved in everything that we do. 10 years ago, there's a survey that they do every year. They survey 1% of our population, so about 560 people. And they ask, are you conservative, moderate, or liberal? 10 years ago, the vast majority self-identified as conservative. Wyoming was the most conservative state in the Union, and everyone agreed that they were. Now this year in 2023, that survey shows that less than half Wyoming citizens self-identify as conservative. 10 years ago, there were only 10% of the state that self-identified as liberal. Now that's almost double. So why is the change? It's not because I've changed. I've lived here most of my life. I think it's because we're getting outside influence. People are moving here, they're bringing their money and their ideology with them. And that's why the demographics are changing. And we heard earlier how Colorado changed in a matter of 2 years from red to purple to blue. That seems to have happened very, very quickly. But I can guarantee you, it didn't happen in just 2 years. It happened in the 10 or 15 years prior to that, as they slowly changed from conservative to more moderate. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen here. We're a hard-working society here in Wyoming. We do our chores even in the wintertime in a snowstorm. We work from dawn to dusk, and sometimes after dusk, because this is the way we grew up. And let me just tell you a little story here. You probably all know of Connie and Perry Benny that live up north here. Or they're passed away, but they built a home up in the mountains, 7 miles from the highway. And they had 2 young kids when they moved up there on the mountainside. And so those kids would ride their bikes down to the highway 7 miles to get on the school bus, and then they'd ride their bikes back home at the end of the day. Well, it was about this time of the year with the first snowstorm, and the kids slept in thinking, well, Dad's going to take us down to the bus stop. He came into their room, woke them up, and said, you're going to be late and miss the bus. Here's your skis. And they had to ski down 7 miles to get to the bus stop. Well, the worst part of it is that was all downhill. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was no Dad waiting at the bus stop to pick them up. They had to ski back uphill, and it took them more than 2 hours to get home. Harry said they belly ached and complained like you wouldn't believe that night, thinking that they could get their dad to change his mind. The next morning, he woke them up early and says, here's your skis. They did that through their school years. Both of those kids went to the Winter Olympics. And the girl won a silver medal in the biathlon. That's where you ski and shoot and ski and shoot. Here in Wyoming, we do hard things. But that makes us a stronger society. And that's why I read that quote, a ship in harbor is safe. But that is not what ships are built for. We're not built to go the easy route. We're conservatives. We believe in less government, low taxes, and living on our own and relying on our ingenuity and our creativity and our hard work. Now I bring up the BLM RMP, Resource Management Plan. This has been 12 years in the making. Every 10 years they're supposed to come up with a new plan, but it's taken 12 years. And they've worked on this for 12 years. And here in Sublett County, you might think, well, that's Rock Springs resource area. That's not going to affect us here in Sublett County. But this first map, you can see that you're surrounded by the Pinedale, which is yours, Pinedale resource area. You got the Rollins, you got the Kemmer, and the Lander. I can guarantee you this is the blueprint of what's coming down the pipe. Rock Springs resource management area is just a spear point. What happens in Rock Springs is going to happen in Pinedale in the near future, and it'll scare you what they're proposing. So I know some of the BLM people that worked on this plan, they have since retired, and so they're willing to tell me what actually went on behind the scenes. Next slide, please, stage. There's 4 alternatives. Alternative A is just keep on doing it the way it's been doing for the past 10 or 12 years. No action. And then they came up with 2 extreme alternatives. Alternative B is conservation and preservation, just strictly all the way to the left. And then C was going to the right. Okay, let's develop the resources more. And those were just to be bookends as they studied this out. And this employee or retired employee said they spent 2 months coming up with these 2 plans because they were so extreme. And they spent their time on D, which is more in the middle. They spent years coming up with alternative D. When this was published last, I guess it was in the end of May, first part of June, they were shell-shocked that B was the preferred alternative. And I'll explain why that is. Next slide, please. See. So, so this is what's going to happen. This is on the left. Your left is the current mode, and on the right is the proposed B. And green is withdraw from all mineral leasing. So you can see they're going to withdraw much of the resource area from minerals. Next slide, please. This is solid minerals. This is coal, trona, gold, all those things. I don't know what that color is, magenta or kind of reddish orange.
Rust.
Rust, that's a good one. Rust is coal. You can see how much is excluded today from coal leasing on the left. With this preferred alternative, they're going to exclude almost everything except for the private land from coal leasing. Next slide, please. Fluid mineral leasing. This is oil and gas. So red is unavailable for leasing. You can see on the left there's just a little bit of red. On the right, everything is red. The green is no surface occupancy. And that part over here where there is not any red, they've colored green. Okay, we'll lease the minerals, but there's no surface occupancy. That's going to be pretty tough, Mike, right? That's going to be pretty tough to do that. Next slide, please. Rights of way. On the left is what it is BLM managed. All the area is in green is BLM managed, and over here on the rust is no rights of road rights of way. They're going to shut this down, and this is going to be the scary part. Next slide. Off-highway vehicle use. This is the important part. On the left is, right now, you can drive on these roads that are out there anywhere you want. But on the right, it becomes designated trails only. Any of you went into the forest looking for a road to go on with your four-wheeler? There's just a handful that are available. There's roads everywhere, logging roads and everything. But they have all these signs, no vehicle traffic. This is what they're saying here, is all over here in the desert. They'll have signs, no vehicle traffic, no off-road vehicle use. And what's ironic is every proposal, every alternative that the BLM is proposing, A, B, C, and D, well, B, C, and D, they all look identical as to this on the right. They are going to shut down the trails, shut down the roads, and only make it accessible on designated trails.
They're probably going to fire 90% of their personnel, right?
I'm sorry?
Then they'll fire 90% of their personnel, right?
This is scary. This is scary. They're going to try to drive us off of the public lands. Next slide, please. This is where it's coming from. This is from the United Nations back in the 1990s. They were designating, and I don't know if you can see this, the red, it says core reserves and corridors, little to no human use. This is the United Nations deciding what use the United States should have for the land. And look at all the red around Wyoming. No human use. This is where it's coming from. We got to be worried about this. This is why I'm bringing this up to all y'all, is because what happens in the Rock Springs Resource Management Area is going to happen to the rest of the state of Wyoming. Now, they're having public meetings throughout the state. There was one in Lyman a week ago. Now, let me tell you what happened in Lyman. Bunch of people, we got a bunch of people to go there for public comment. And some people got there early and set up chairs in the room. When the BLM people got there, they took the chairs down, put them in a closet, and locked them up. They took down the PA system. And they told them that Washington told the people, the BLM here, to don't allow any public questions or comments. Isn't that scary?
Yes,
This is what we're coming to, and I'm worried this is going to be shoved down our throat. No matter what we say on public comments, it's going to happen. But what we're doing is trying to set up litigation arguments, because we're going to have to litigate this. We're going to have to push back. Now, who should be pushing back?
The governor.
Bingo. And what is the governor pushing back?
No.
With his attorney general. I can guarantee you, if this was happening in Texas, they would be pushing back right now. But nothing is happening.
He's not even going to the meetings, just so you know, because I called his office and asked.
So we have several legislative committees that are issuing comments and opposition. County commissioners are doing this, but our executive office within the state of Wyoming is silent at this point. We need to stand up. I encourage everyone to to submit a comment in opposition, because from what I've heard, they're getting thousands upon thousands of comments, but there's more in favor than against. And a lot of those comments are coming from outside of Wyoming, but there's more in favor of this than against. We need to let our voices be heard. A ship is safe in the harbor, but we were not built that way as Wyoming citizens. Can I take questions?
Sure can.
Great, questions. This is what I'm hearing.
It wasn't a question, is I've been telling some of the local ranchers that they need to be careful because they're gonna try to push their cows off the BLM land, and they said, oh, it'll never happen here.
Very good point, because the BLM, with this conservation emphasis, they can lease the ground for conservation purposes. They don't have to lease it for multi-use. And so they can say conservation is a use, and so they can get some rich person to buy up that lease and just say conservation only.
And then the rich person who buys up the lease for conservation only sells carbon credits to their friends back east and on the west coast and gets even richer.
At $400 a ton.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Back there, in the very back.
Scott.
You know, they've already done this on the reservation. In April, they pulled all the leases, from the Shoshone side of the res, pulled all their grazing leases. They got hand-delivered letters giving them 5 days to get their cows off their grazing leases that those families have had for hundreds of years. And they got away with it because some rich guy over in the neighborhood that has in Buffalo and the carbon tax credits. But after the winter we had, and most of those people have been running cows for generations and generations. But they had to give them 5 days to pull their cows off the Elk Creek leases, and they still don't have their cows back on. But they didn't even have hay because it was everybody knows about the winter. They did it, and they got away with it in Wyoming, and it was the Bureau of Interior and BIA. No public comment, no nothing. So
if we stay in this harbor, we will not be effective. We need to rise up and fight those kind of things, and we need to fight this kind of stuff because they want the cattle off the grazing so that they can have more wild horses. They want to convert our land, and there's another. I think I have one more that shows the wetland map. And what they want to do is convert to where we have wilderness area and wild lands. If you look at the definition of wild land, it's property that has been cultivated or had human activity that they move people off of that land and it becomes a wild land. So they want to get humans off carbon. Carbon footprint is humans, and they want to reduce the carbon footprint by removing us from these public lands. Yes, please.
Is this also have to do with the Department of the Interior? Is that what it's called?
These last two slides are from the United Nations. But prior to that comes from the RMP.
Department of Interior also is very.
Yeah, it's all encompassed. But this resource management proposal is over 1,300 pages. We've got 90 days to digest that and make a comment. I've tried to go through that. I get buggy-eyed trying to read all of it. It's just so much. They spent 12 years putting it together and gave us 90 days to comment.
what was that?
Yes, please.
This is a part of the 2030 agenda.
Yes.
You'll own
Yes.
nothing and be happy, and they'll starve you to death.
Yes. And can you back it up one stage? If you, with my engineer eye, I think there's 30% red on that map. Carol, is that right? About right?
Looks about like that to me.
He's a better engineer than I ever was. But I think that's part of this 30 by 30
A lot of
agenda.
blood on it.
And they want to expand, and they want to move the human footprint off of public lands, ultimately. we need to stand up, and my time is up, but 2 more questions, John.
I just wanna, I think that we need to fight back by saying that Wyoming is a fence-out state. That's one way to fight back. And say, well, BLM,
We
you
can
better
fix out
start,
the BLM.
no, that the BLM better start fencing if they wanna keep us off.
Yeah. Well, and in the checkerboard especially, Laura, this is going to be difficult for them because if they say no road use in the checkerboard, but the private individual who owns the other part of the checkerboard, they have a right to access to the property. So that's a good argument.
But I can tell you that if they have to fence, then they should have to go through all of the clearances and the NEPA process and everything else that the rest of us have to go through with the BLM.
Right.
Right? And that takes years,
So,
several
you bring
years.
up this fence out issue, which we're a fence out state. It's been relayed to me that if you lose your lease on federal land, then it's the other way around. If you have to move your cattle off that land, you have to fence your cattle in. Which means that ranchers that lose their leases to conservation organizations are going to have to fence at $17,000 a mile. So this is so egregious you can't even imagine. So, did you have a second question?
Yeah, there's one over here.
I think it's important to remember that bureaucracies do things because they can, not because it's right. And that's exactly what you're talking about here. It's the duty of the legislature to pitch a fit when nobody else does, but also our Congress, Congresswoman Hageman, should start talking about pulling money out from under the BLM so they can't do stuff like this.
Give her time.
I think Harriet Hageman is a rock star, because she is already doing that.
Yes.
And I'm so proud of my On this name tag that I wear with pride, it says representative. I was elected by the people. I represent you. I'm not representing the government. I'm representing people. When you need help, call your representative. I am honored to be a representative, and I'll help in any way that I can. Thank you.
Great questions. We're going to be available for 20 minutes to just mingle around and talk some more. So if you have other questions, go directly to these legislators and ask your questions. We're going to get dinner started here briefly, so I hope you all will stay for dinner with us.